Hello Internet, welcome to the first playoff rankings video. Instead of doing the normal power rankings at this point in the season, we're going to be doing playoff picture, where I discuss the teams that are either locked for the playoffs, are still in competition for the playoffs, or anything like that affecting it. After this intro, I am also going to explain to you how the playoffs are going to be done this season, exactly for those of you that don't know the makeup of them and what's going to happen. Okay, the playoffs for this season of the GBA are going to be the top three teams from each conference, the Kanto and the Johto conference. In the event of a tie for any of the positions, it goes to highest differential. So as you can see in the example I have, the third and fourth place teams would both be 13 and 2. But the one with the higher differential is considered the third place team, so they would advance to the playoffs. The other one would be left behind. Once we have the conference people locked down, the first place for each of those conferences gets a bye the first week. They don't have to play a match that week, so the first week of the playoffs will just be the second and third place from each conference playing. The winner of that will then go on the next week to play the first place winner of their same conference, which will then leave us with the theoretical best of each conference, who will go on to play in the finals to decide who is the overall GBA Super Kami Guru. For all intents and purposes, usually it would probably make more sense to do Kanto first, since they're usually listed first and everything like that. But I'm going to go ahead and do the Johto Conference first, because the Johto Conference is a lot shorter and easier to do because it's already locked. The Johto Conference is locked in. The three teams that are going to be making it are the New Orleans Pelipers, the Pittsburgh Steelix, and the San Jose Sharpedos. There's no way for any of the other teams to win any matches and get in, even based off differential at this point. The only thing that can change is the records of the top three teams and their own differentials, which would dictate who goes into first place and who gets the bye the first week. At the moment, the team with the bye is the New Orleans Pelipers, who are probably the most scary and consistent team out of all of them, and I think are generally favored by a lot of people to be the premier Johto team. Second place is actually the Pittsburgh Steelix, despite the roster disadvantage. Huge differential thanks to a couple of really big weeks helps them a ton here, which is even more impressive when you consider they're coming off the first week where they had a -5 differential coming out of the first week. That's a hard thing to come back from, but they definitely have in huge ways swinging. Third place, not far behind, but far enough behind that it's going to be rough without some actual win-loss differences, is going to be the San Jose Sharpedos. Now, thankfully, these teams do play a couple of each other in these next couple of weeks, so it's probably not going to come down to differential all that much. At this point, though, it does, because they all have the same record. So what you see right there is the actual, if the playoffs happen this week, order. But since they don't happen this week, there's still room for change. I don't expect to see it change too much, but it could. I think this is a fairly good prediction. I would not be surprised at all to see the Pelipers get the bye as the first week team and have the Steelix and Sharpedos have to slug it out. Alright, now heading back to the much more discussion-heavy Kanto Conference. The first place team in the Kanto Conference right now are the Toronto Maple Leafeons, having come back big from the start of the season. They're ahead on numbers, not necessarily on differential, but they are the only 8-3 team in that conference, so they are pretty much the only locked team at this point. There's no way, no matter how much they lose, that they'll get knocked down. Really, it's possible, but not super likely. I would say they're pretty much guaranteed. Second place, Arizona Deoxys. While they're not statistically as guaranteed, they might even be in a better position given that they still have the highest differential in their conference at a really staggering plus 15. Not quite last season staggering, but still up there. A contender with the Johto Conference, which is kind of differentially padded at this point. 7-4, tied up with the Red Sox at the much lower differential. Nick hasn't really focused on differential this season. He's just been focused on win-loss, which at this point has him in the playoffs, but by a very narrow margin with a lot of other teams nipping at their heels. Like I said, I absolutely expect the Toronto Maple Leafs to make it to the finals. Not the finals, but the playoffs and probably the finals. But at the very least, the playoffs and the interconference semifinals. The Arizona Deoxys are looking really good to stay in there. I don't think that any team can catch up with them while they keep winning, losing, and beat that plus 15 differential. That's asking for a lot. I would say it's pretty safe money at this point to put them into the playoffs. The Boston Red Sox, however, are just hanging on to the border right there at that plus 4 differential, which is easily tied and caught up on by a lot of the other teams in the league right now. There's not a lot of room for them to mess up and go wrong, which is unfortunate considering this week they play the Arizona Deoxys. So if they don't come out of that match with a win, it's just going to make them closer and closer to being bait for the other teams to knock down out of the top spot. I'm not convinced they're necessarily going to be the team to make it. I think they've played well enough throughout the season that they have a very good shot of doing it. But just the way some of the matchups go, they have a really rough last couple of weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are one of the teams that's actually in a fortunate enough position to dictate their own fate. Because I think week 13 they play the New York Yankees, who are their chief competitor. And that's probably going to be the match who decides which one of them is in the top 3, barring some massive upsets. So hopefully, they can do well and can pull that out and secure their own spot and not just have it taken out from them by other people doing better and not necessarily them doing poorly. Next up are the Kanto top 3 chasers and tailbiters. The number 4 team in the league right now is the New York Yankees, Shady Penguin, actually, who've done a really good job despite kind of having a middling season where they weren't necessarily able to ever get any huge streaks going. They still just managed to keep it positive and keep the differential positive, which is the big thing, because they are tied at 6-5 with the Thunderous, but the Thunderous haven't had a good differential at all. Too many big losses, not enough big wins, whereas the New York Yankees have fluctuated between +4, -4 the entire season, but right now at the end are managing to keep it up in the positives, which is all they need, really, considering they're so close to the Boston Red Sox at this point. Like I said before, I think week 13 is probably going to decide the fate of them, and it's going to be whoever plays better that week, assuming, they don't get some big losses. I think Shady is looking all right in a general playoff picture. He does play the Grand Bulls this week, which, if you look at the stats, it seems like he should be, set up to win that. However, you do have to keep in mind, this is a Shady Penguin vacation week, and as we've seen in the past season, when he goes on vacation and comes back, he tends to lose. So this could be the Grand Bulls' chance to come in and really throw off the other conference playoff picture and screw with some people by winning a match that isn't going to help them this season, but would help them with their draft picks next season and really hurt the Yankees out. Following them up is the Thunderous. Like I said, doing solid, decent. They've been on a downslide the past half of the season, and I think this is kind of a thing we've seen with them before last season, where just not necessarily maintaining enough momentum to, hold on to the playoff bid all the way throughout the season. They still have a chance. Like I said, none of the Kanto Conference teams are actually mathematically out of the picture yet, which is very surprising at this late a point in the season. They could still win it. They have to win every single match, and some of the other people have to lose several of theirs, which isn't super likely, but it is possible. really the thing they would have to do is get some huge wins, not just wins, but really just 5-0, 6-0, kind of get that differential back up to the point where they could tie someone and win in. Which I don't necessarily see happening, but it's possible. They have enough powerful things that could potentially set up sweep on the team. Just haven't seen it happen and work out for them yet. The sixth place team in the Kanto Conference right now is the Milwaukee Sawsbucks. I think the Milwaukee Sawsbucks are pretty happy with what they've done this season. While I'm sure they would love to get into the playoffs, I think they're aware of the realistic, limitations of the draft team and where they are. I think they're very happy with the numbers they've put up this season, and kind of looked at this and maybe a little bit of next season as rebuilding seasons. They've realized what they have to do, and I think they're just happy to have improved. And, they realize that what they have is what they have, and it's not going to necessarily be enough. Like I said, they absolutely could still do it. It's still possible. I just don't think it's super likely that it's going to happen for them. But, hey, I've been proven wrong many weeks before. The Sawsbucks could absolutely go on a 3-week win streak of 6-0s and prove me wrong again. I just wouldn't bet any of my paycheck on it necessarily. Last place for the Kanto Conference, but as I've said before, still mathematically in the playoff run is the Atlanta Hawluchas. Granted, they have to win every single match for the rest of the season. The Red Sox or Deoxys would have to, which is impossible, one of them, has to lose every single match for the rest of the season. No one else in the conference can move up to win every match in the season over them, and then they have to have higher differential than anyone else who ends up at 7-7 for the season. That's a lot of stuff working against them. As I said before, I don't even really think the Sawsbucks have much of a playoff chance at this point, let alone the Hawluchas. But just because they are mathematically still viable, I included them in the video. Because, hey, they could do it. We've seen stranger sports miracles happen. They don't happen that often, but they could happen. So that's why they're in here. We're still going to stick to the format of doing predictions at the end of the video. So that being said, let's go ahead and do the Week 12 predictions and how they're going to affect the playoffs here. First up is the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunderous. This would be a really good week for the Thunderous to turn things around. And statistically, they have a very good shot, as the Cavaliers haven't done very well this season, only getting one win so far. This could also potentially be a good week for any of those multiple setup sweepers I was talking about to go to town and try and really bump up that differential back into the realm of being competitive for a third-place playoff spot. If there was ever a week that's going to tell how their fortunes are going to be and that they need to show big, it's probably Week 12 for the Oklahoma City Thunderous. Next up is the Atlanta Hawlucha and the Pittsburgh Steelix. The Steelix don't need this as much as the Hawluchas. The Hawluchas have to be really hungry and really aggressive for this match. I'm not sure they have it. This is going to be, the first time we've seen these guys go at it, and that's a big hill for the Hawluchas to climb. But honestly, if they want to make the playoffs and they want to make the championship, the entire rest of the season is big hills, and the hills are only going to get bigger as they go into the playoffs. I think this is probably going to be the week they're mathematically knocked out, to be honest with you. I think the Steelix are going to try and, get up there, get some differential going, and try and, close out and maybe get up back into that number one differential spot so that they can get a bye the first week. That would definitely help out Joe, even though I'm sure he's in no way afraid of having to play the extra match. Next up, Chicago Grand Bulls, New York Yankees. This is what I was talking about, where the Yankees have a lot to lose this week. If they lose, it's going to hurt their playoff chances. It's going to hurt their differential even more. Kyle and the Grand Bulls have absolutely nothing to lose here. Another loss is just another loss. It will hurt their draft choices, as it's going to put them back as he actually traded away his draft, but now he has Numb Nexus's first draft pick due to a late season trade. So Kyle actually needs to come out with a better record than Nexus by the end of the season in order to have a better draft pick next year, just because of the way things have moved around. So I think this is going to be a week Kyle's really going to want to pull out a win. It'll also upset the Mankeys and just throw a wrench in there, and Havoc is always a little bit of fun. But even if Kyle loses, he just loses and he's slightly lower in the draft, not to a huge point, really. Shady needs this, but as I said before, post-vacation Shady is not the best Shady. That slow start Reggie Giga Shady, he does terrible. If ever there was a week where Kyle was going to win, I think it would probably be this one. Next up is the Boston Red Sox and Arizona Deoxys. This isn't a huge week. It's, I think the Deoxys have enough of a differential lead that they can hang out in third place if it comes down to it and the Red Sox win. But the Red Sox, if they lose and are still down there in the third place spot, are just going to be even more desperate and hungry to hold on. It's going to be a lot harder for them. Unfortunately for them, I think Gubbs has gotten back on his game. He's gotten his head back into the league, and he's really been climbing back up there. And especially during playoff times, he tends to push really hard. I don't see the Red Sox winning it this week, and I think it's just going to make the Kanto Conference an even closer, more volatile shake-up for that third-place playoff spot. Next up is the Maple Leafeons and the Sawsbucks. If the Sawsbucks win this, it's not going to hurt the Leafeons too much. Obviously, I said they're still in a very good position. It would be huge for the Sawsbucks to win it. However, they do play again later on in the season, and that's going to be, that's going to be a little bit much for them to go at. Actually, no, I'm mistaken. They already played their 2 matches, so this is the last time they play. I don't see the Sawsbucks winning this because they did lose the last time. Gote hasn't really lost any of his steps. He still has a much more fleshed out full roster than the Sawsbucks do. I think it's time for the Sawsbucks to just go ahead, head down, play their games to the best of their abilities, and really start focusing on their rebuilding efforts for next season. And I think that's what you're going to see them do. LA Nido Kings and Utah Jasmine. Both of these teams are mathematically out of the playoffs. Unfortunately, it doesn't have anything to do with anything for them. Had they both won last week's match and the week before that, they would have still been in it, and this would have been a make-or-break week. But like I said, they're not. It's still an interesting match as the Nido Kings have slipped pretty far down this season, and the Jasmine have gotten better as the season's progressed. That said, I think the Jasmine will probably win this week, but it's just going to be for honor and bragging rights more so than any kind of helping out anything as far as playoffs go. Last match for the week is another one that doesn't necessarily matter, but for totally different reasons. It's the New Orleans Pelipers and the San Jose Sharpedos. Doesn't really matter as much because both teams are playoff locked for their conference. However, it could, change the differential around. It would help a big swing out. It would actually help Joe out the most if, Tom can pull off a big win here, because Tom, at that point, Joe should still be able to stay ahead of the Sharpedos in differential, assuming he wins his match, and he would actually probably shoot up above John and New Orleans Pelipers, as their differential is only 1 point higher right now, and any kind of loss, even a 1-0, would tie it up, let alone drop it below, depending on how well Joe does. That being said, I think John's a little bit hungrier for this match than Tom is, and I think John's played a better game more consistently throughout the season. He still has, obviously, same numbers of wins and losses and things like that, but when you look at the differential, John tends to win a little bit bigger. Tom is just kind of scraping by on his wins, making sure he's securing the win in a less volatile way. So I'm going to give a slight edge to the Pelipers on this one. And that's going to wrap it up for all the predictions. Let me know what you thought of the video. It's a little bit short. I kind of just wanted mostly to explain the process of how the playoffs are going to go down and set up some of the mathematics for what's going on this week. So it's a little bit shorter and a little bit on the duller side, but just trying to be a little bit more informative and less analytical and opinionated. Next week, hopefully, I'll have a bit more time and I'll be able to go in depth into what I think is going to happen a little bit more for you. But that being said, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a comment, talk about things, tell me what you liked and disliked. I'm actually heavily thinking about doing the visual styling and grouping of this next season, because it would save me a lot of time to just run down 4 things at once instead of doing them slide by slide as I was doing before. I would change it up a little bit. I'll also probably bump up the font sizes next week, let alone next season if I do something like this. So let me know what you guys think about that. Again, we're still, hey, anybody can win that Kanto conference, so leave a comment and say who you think is going to make that third or even second and third Kanto spot, who you see taking that the whole way, and what you think is going to happen for the rest of the season and next season. That being said, thanks for watching the video. Bye, guys.